I haven't made a video in a while. They're a lot of work and I've been in college, but here's the thing. I have a tech review channel because I honestly just love this stuff. So when LG emailed me and asked me if I wanted to check out the G7 ThinQ, which I'm just going to call the G7 from now on, I honestly couldn't resist. So yes, LG provided this review unit, but I have to give it back after, and I'm certainly not paid or anything. So don't worry, only honest opinions here. That said, thanks LG. As soon as I took this phone out of the box, I was struck by how nice it feels. When I reviewed the G6, I thought the phone felt really sturdy and had excellent build quality, but there were kind of a few too many sharp edges that just made it a little uncomfortable to hold for me. The G7, however, has smoothed out beautifully and it now feels really nice. With the G7, LG has joined a bunch of other manufacturers like Apple in offering a phone that's got very small bezels, but also features a notch at the top. For those of you who don't know, that's basically just a part of the bezel that extends into the top of the screen to hold the camera and stuff. A lot of people really hate the notch, and I get it. A little bezel on the top isn't a big deal, but if you're missing a chunk of your screen, that could be. Fortunately, I think the one LG has is one of the more tame implementations. It's not super tall and it's not super wide. They didn't have to stretch the status bar on Android like Essential did with their phone, and I can still easily see the time and all my notifications and the network status and the battery on the left and right sides. There's plenty of room for everything. LG builds the space around the notch as a new second screen, basically trying to say that we should think of the space around the notch as extra screen area instead of thinking about the space the notch takes up as lost screen area. But it's still just the status bar and notification area. You can change the colors and adjust whether you want the screen to sort of stretch up to it, but there's not much to see here. It can occasionally cause small issues like this, where having Facebook Messenger chat heads open horizontally resulted in a bit of it getting cut off by the notch. Fortunately, however, the example I'm showing you now is pretty much the only time I ever saw it happen. It doesn't happen when you've got the actual Messenger app open, only when you're using a chat head, and only horizontally. Still, something to keep in mind, it's possible other little bugs like this exist. I don't think they're common or pervasive enough to worry about it though. Personally, it's fine. So, I think the notch is pretty harmless, and honestly, it even looks kinda cool in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I'd probably prefer it wasn't there, but it's kinda neat to see something different. The bezels on the bottom and the sides are quite small, and the phone just looks really, really nice. The back of the phone is a nice piece of glass that's curved in a way reminiscent of the Galaxy S8 and S9, and I think it looks really good. This is where you'll find the phone's rear dual camera setup that I'll talk more about later, and the very quick fingerprint scanner. I find it's in a good position and it reads my finger correctly nearly every single time. I have fewer issues with detection on this than I do on my Galaxy S7. I do have mixed feelings on having the sensor on the back versus the front though. When you're using the phone, it's super nice to just reach up and hit the sensor, but when it's sitting on a desk, it can be a little annoying to have to use the pin fallback or a pattern, or to just pick it up and use the fingerprint sensor. That said, I'm really glad LG included, as they always do, double tap to wake, as it makes the on a desk experience better for sure. One last thing to mention is that the fingerprint sensor is no longer the phone's power button, which is now a separate button located on the right side. The left side of the phone features 3 buttons, the volume keys, and a new Google Assistant button. In fact, Google Assistant is now branded right on the box. LG seems to be really going all in on it. Personally, I didn't find the button very useful. If I'm going to talk to my phone, I might as well start the conversation with just a "Hey Google," rather than a button press. It would be really nice if you could remap this button to the camera or whatever you want, but that doesn't seem to be an option right now. That said, all of the buttons on the side feel really nice and clicky. I actually really like them for how good they feel. I also never had any trouble discerning the volume keys from the Google Assistant button. On the top, we have the tray for the SIM card and an SD card, which you can use optionally, which is a really nice inclusion for users who like to keep a lot of data on their phone, like music. And on the bottom we have the USB 3.1 Type-C charging port, which charges the phone quite quickly thanks to Quick Charge 3.0, a headphone jack, and the speaker grills. The headphone jack features a quad DAC for improved audio quality that, I'm sorry, I'm just not nearly enough of an audiophile to be able to talk about. Although I am really glad that there's a headphone jack at all, as LG is one of the few left still providing it. Please don't stop. Coming back to the speakers for a minute, they're actually a big focus for the G7. When I first received a press email from LG about the G7, they talked about how they wanted users to feel like they can use their phone for listening to music around the house rather than relying on a Bluetooth speaker, and said it would be really loud. Well, I often do take my phone around the house listening to music or audiobooks or YouTube videos, and this one is definitely loud. It feels like it's got those last 2 or 3 notches of volume I always wish my Galaxy S7 had, so I find it fulfills its purpose here really well. I definitely don't feel like I need to grab a different speaker. I wouldn't say the audio quality is incredible, but it does sound quite good. It actually changes quite a lot when you set it on a flat surface, because the phone uses its inside as kind of an echo chamber to make it louder. It's sort of hard to explain, but here, have a listen. Interestingly, I never heard about this. Now let's talk about the screen. The G7 has a 6.1-inch Corning Gorilla Glass 5 IPS display with a whopping 1440 by 3120 resolution. I really like this taller than 16 by 9 aspect ratio that has been popular for the last few years. It makes reading things really nice, and it doesn't make much difference to the video watching experience in my opinion. Yeah, now there's big black bars on the sides when you're watching a video in landscape, but it just means that the viewing area is about the same size as it is on my S7, which is basically just a shorter phone of about the same width. And of course, you do have the option to stretch the video to fit the screen, which means that a bit will get cut off, also by the notch, but like I said, I honestly just don't mind the black bars. The screen can be a little bit hard to see in direct sunlight, but it isn't too bad. And overall, I think it's just a really nice looking screen. Everything looks extremely sharp, and I really just love using it. Let's talk more about specs. We've got a launch OS of Android 8.0 with a planned upgrade to Android 9.0 later on, a Snapdragon 845 CPU with Adreno 630 GPU, 4GB of RAM with 64GB of storage, or 6GB of RAM with 128GB of storage with micro SD card expansion, and a 3000 mAh non-removable battery, and IP68 water and dust resistance. Personally, I'm not a big fan of having 2 different RAM size variants on smartphones, but I have the 4GB version here and performance is excellent. So, whatever, I guess. I really don't miss the other 2GB. As far as software goes, I find LG's Android skin pretty inoffensive. It's clean and fast, and my only complaint whatsoever is that it doesn't feature the ability to manage Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connections from the swipe down menu like stock Android and TouchWiz do. Instead, it's kind of dumbed down to being a simple on-off toggle that makes you navigate to the full settings for anything more. I know it sounds like a little thing, and it is, but that's one of my favorite features of the swipe down menu and really Android in general. So I don't know what possesses them to remove it. Now, as far as LG's stock launcher, I'm not a huge fan. There's nothing egregious about it, but after taking the time to rearrange all of my icons just how I like them, it randomly reset itself to show all the ones I had already hidden, completely destroying my changes. This is something I also distinctly remember happening when I reviewed another one of the LG phones. So after that, I just switched to Action Launcher. The Pixel Launcher would also be a good alternative, which is free. Battery life with the phone has been really solid, especially considering the relatively small battery and the fact that the battery life on the G6 left me pretty unimpressed. It gets me through the day, often with lots of screen on time, as long as I'm not doing a bunch of gaming, and outlasts my Galaxy S7 quite well. I'm pretty pleased with this, especially since it has a bigger screen and a smaller battery than the S7. Now, let's talk cameras. On the back, we have two cameras, both 16 megapixel, one being a wide-angle lens and one regular. I really like this. I find the wide-angle lens is great for things like taking pictures of rooms, which can often be difficult to do while keeping a good sense of scale. I do wish that the phone was a little faster at switching between the two, however. The camera app itself also has a really cool manual mode that gives you full control over ISO and shutter speed, and I thought that was really awesome, though admittedly, I really didn't play around with it that much. As far as video, you've got the options of 4K at 60. The front camera is 8 megapixels featuring 30 frames per second recording at 1080p in 16 by 9 or 720p in either 16 by 9 or 18 by 9. Here are a few shots. Now, to sum up my thoughts on the camera, I want to explain how I use cameras in smartphones. I open them and take pictures. I never really mess around with advanced settings, I just shoot on auto and see what I get. Now again, the advanced settings on this camera are really cool, and that's something to praise. However, unfortunately, I found that while bright outdoor shots were as great as you'd expect from a 2018 smartphone, the low-light performance just isn't very good. This picture of my cat is a pretty good representation of how bright it was in real life, and it just came out really blurry. Admittedly, I didn't use it a ton, but it seems like it's just not very good for anything indoors, even if it is relatively bright indoors. The only other issue I had with this phone was that the Wi-Fi seemed to often not work when I was still quite close to my router. That said, other reviews I watched didn't mention this, so I really think my unit might have just been a bit defective, and honestly, I don't think you should factor that in. The very last thing I want to touch on is games. I don't game much on phones, but this is a powerful phone with a nice screen, so I played a couple matches of PUBG Mobile and found the performance was solid and the phone never got really hot like my Galaxy S7 often does. 40 minutes of playing dropped the battery 19%, which I thought was pretty reasonable for that game. So, that's it. Would I use this phone as my daily driver? Yes, but I really wish I was happier with the camera. Indoor shots felt like a downgrade from my Galaxy S7. Everything else about this phone, however, is genuinely excellent. This is the best LG phone I have ever used. It's fast, it's sleek, it's awesome. I like to cover as much as I can in my reviews, so I hope you found this one helpful. If you did, please drop a like, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications when I post. Leave me a comment about your experiences with the G7, what you like, what you didn't like, or if you have any questions, and I'll try to help you out. If you want to keep up on social media, check out my Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram in the links below, and you'll also find an Amazon affiliate link where you can buy the G7 or other cool stuff, and if you do, I'll get a small kickback from Amazon for referring you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.